Hello, everyone. This is episode 57 of the Inventive Marketing Club. We're here every Friday morning so we can build a better marketing strategy together. Claire isn't joining us today, but we do have Alex, who is today's very special guest. We are going to be talking about a world without email. And it's a review of Cal Newport's book, which has basically loads of ideas on how to achieve a calmer, more intentional and productive working life. It's kind of focused around email and chat apps and Slack and stuff like that. And I thought I would invite Alex on to come and talk about it because Alex recommended the book to me, or actually, Alex, you recommended the podcast to me. I think that's what we were having one of our chats, and you said, "Oh, there's this really good podcast, Cal Newport, World Without Email," and I just wrote down World Without Email, got the book, and dived right into it. But before we go there, let's introduce Alex. Alex, from Communion Architects. Perhaps you can tell me a little bit about some of the nice projects you've been working on recently.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much. And a big shout out to Ben and Catherine. For those of you on a marketing journey, these guys have been, what do you call that? That your spiritual guide, your guru.
Thank you very much. Catherine's actually joining us on the club today as well.
Communion Architects, we like to say that we work closely with people to deliver exceptional projects that transform people's spaces and more importantly, their lives. So we work in two key areas, really, mostly with people's homes and as well on people's churches. So one is a sort of private world of individuals and the other is a sort of corporate community world. That sort of takes in a couple of other kind of key building types, sort of listed buildings. We do quite a lot of work with them, and also barns or buildings that have been something else, so some sort of conversions.
I'm actually bringing some of them up on screen so people can have a look. So
yeah, thank you very much. We're just, as I guess I was brought up on a farm. I've always wanted to be an architect. And what I liked about the architect idea was, designing and then making something. And therefore, as a company, we like to work closely with people to deliver designs really just around their key, what they want, their key briefs, and then help them deliver those on site in reality, which weirdly marks us out from other architects. Architects have tended to sort of focus on what they're good at, which is really the drawing aspect, and leave the building to others. But where's the fun in that? Hey, so that's kind of what we do. Yeah, we've done I guess on the projects we just sort of finished working on at the moment. We've just finished a church in Tamworth in Arden, which has been a beautiful project actually, and that's opening. Opening. I mean, churches tend to have a sort of longer time of opening with various events. I'm going down there this Thursday. There's an opera Tosca, which would be great to see the church in use. So a lot of our churches are typified by, basically reordering, as we call them in the church world, just making them more appropriate for, toilets, loos, creating cafe spaces, just so that you can actually use the church for other things than just sitting and listening to people preach or deliver a eulogy. We see churches as hugely important buildings within the community, and just try and make them do the things that they need to do these days. In terms of the houses, what we've done, we're working on a Georgian farmhouse up sort of North Leinster at the moment. We're working on a series of buildings for one of the estates. The one we've just started on site is a listed gatehouse, which we're turning into sort of quite a destination holiday home, which is sort of taking a lot of our attention at the moment. Then we're also working on a new house for a guy that's got Parkinson's, and that's really, really interesting, thinking about how we can create a space all around him. So lots of things that keep me out of trouble, basically.
Well, I mean, that's why we worked with you on our previous property and this one in terms of the lighter side of what you do in terms of architecture. Nothing really huge, but I just like the way you think. One of the key considerations, actually, it's quite key in the I'd imagine with the project for the guy who's got Parkinson's, is really thinking about how people use a space day to day. And I've never really come across that with architects before. They usually are thinking about the design of the property and what it looks like from the outside, and maybe making a statement. Whereas your consideration is much more on how people are going to use the space into the future, for many decades, hopefully into the future. Thinking about how the light comes through the building, how you move, how you sort of come home, where you drop off your bags and things like that. I mean, those are the little details that you rub up against every single day. And it's so important to get them right, because they're either friction or not. And you don't want them to be friction, or friction where it's necessary. That's one of the things I think you really bring to architecture, is the consideration for the human as part of it, or humans as a group. Something that you've been working on, and in terms of your marketing, or let's say at the end of projects, is to really analyze the work that you've done. And I know Catherine's been working a lot with you on the creating case studies and creating a lot of books that you develop. I'll just bring one up on screen now for this house. Is actually that once you've done a project with a client, is to create a book showing the development of that project. Let's see if I can find one here. Here it is, a project story, and it shows what the property looked like, the sort of drawings you went through, maybe some in progress, some work in progress photos, and then obviously the final photos from the house, and then you compile that into a book, which you then present to the client. And I love that idea that not only they're getting a house out of it, they work with you and ultimately they get a new life as part of their house, but they also get this little book, which means they can look back on that journey that they went with you. And I think from a marketing perspective, because I always have that angle, it's great when people come round and they talk about the house, they've actually got something that they can show people. So they're not just talking about it, they can show them, sit in front of them, and then that becomes another way of selling Communion, because your logo's on the front of it and it's something you've produced. And I love that idea. Is that do you find that quite unique in what you do for other architects? Do they have that sort of approach?
I mean, it's always hard to say what other people do and don't do, isn't it? It's been something that we've developed very much as we've developed as the company. And I mean, it's definitely been birthed out of the work that we've done together. But I remember, after we finished our first building and we thought we might need to get some more work in, we thought, well, we need to put a website together, and we managed to convince the clients to take some photos of the building, and then I was tasked with the job of writing it up, and then the guy that I was working with said, well, could you get a quote from the client? Of course, the quote was by far the most powerful piece of writing. And all my kind of stuff was, very dry. And you just suddenly realize that, quite a lot of stuff is said about architecture. Some stuff is said about architects, but actually, the most important person in the relationship is the client.
Yeah.
They have their reasons for building the building. They have their reasons for investing such a large amount of time and money into these things. Wouldn't it be better to allow them to tell their story? So what we sort of moved on to the point of, to is like, well, could we interview the clients at the end of the project? And the first thought was, well, if we interviewed them, then we can kind of get that story, and then Catherine can actually turn that story into the case study. And as soon as we did that, we realized that, the word case study was, obviously the wrong thing to use. This is a story. And actually, I think that narratives within our lives are such a powerful driver we all have narratives. We're all following narratives, and narratives are so important for our own identity. And if people are going to embark on something as important as doing a building, then there is a story that goes with that, and that story is the genesis and the reason for the project. And so, although we was like, okay, well, it's actually much more important to tell that story than a case study. So suddenly, as soon as we did the interviews, it became obvious that, we need to talk about these stories. And it's not really our work that we're promoting. We are sharing our clients' experience of their building project, which ultimately becomes so much more interesting than anything I'm going to say about the project. And also what it does, it has a unique ability to reach out to other people who are also trying to write their own story. And, other people's, our clients' words mean much more to our future clients' words, again, than anything that I could possibly say. So, we then went on from that point. We also thought, well, it'd be kind of good to get some sort of feedback on ourselves. Always a dangerous question to ask, what did you like? Anything you like? Anything you didn't like? And you realize that people are just overwhelmingly, kind, actually. And doing a building project is not an easy thing. We definitely try our hardest. We're definitely not perfect. There were good days and bad days in a project. But when we asked for feedback, overwhelmingly people were very kind about what we'd said, about what we'd done. But also that the things that stood out for them as negatives weren't actually things that we'd done wrong. I'm not saying we hadn't done anything wrong. I had quite a lot of list of things that I thought I'd done wrong. But there were things that actually I hadn't even realized was a problem to them. And that allowed us then, because then I had this other issue that I was trying to get over, is like, when you're going to see a client, they're super excited about this project. They've seen Grand Designs. It's going to take about 45 minutes to deliver this project, and be done, for about a tenner. That's the kind of story that Grand Designs tell. But the reality is that it will cost so much more than people expect. It will take longer. It's definitely a journey that's all about the destination and not so much about the journey. And how do you prepare clients for that without sounding like you're absolutely dreadful at your job? That, let me tell you, it's going to be much more expensive than that. It's going to be, quite an ordeal to go on site. And that's if I do my job really, really badly.
Yeah.
With someone else that might be saying, now we can do it for half the price and don't you worry, we'll talk about anything, which in my view just probably isn't, it's not the life that I have lived delivering projects for people.
Yeah, you want clients to go in eyes wide open.
Yeah. So actually what we started to use the podcast for is that we had all these great resources. So we suddenly opened up the interviews that we had as started to be a podcast range. And each one of them sort of picked up a different, like what we're doing here, really. There were certain things that we talked about. And therefore, when people come along, I can recommend, look, on this one here, these people stayed in their home whilst they did their project. This is their real experience of that, both for good and for bad. If you're thinking of doing that, we can certainly work with that. Sometimes we advise people not to do that, but take a listen to this podcast. And they get to spend, 20 minutes, 30 minutes listening to someone who's an expert on that because they've just lived through that. Yeah. And they're, that is just so helpful for people. And so, suddenly this one resource of, and then, to finally fill that in is, what are we getting from this? I started by wanting to get a quote. We went from a quote to an interview. The interview allowed us to write a story. The story allows us to reach out to potential clients. The story also allows Catherine, and she does so much work on this, to prepare the book, the narrative for the book. The book is so important in terms of, what's the difference between a building and architecture? Architecture is published. It's written about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's what makes it important. And this is where people start their architectural journey, by looking at books, looking at magazines. So, once we've been through this, the way that we recognize its importance is that we publish the book on it, which tells the story of the project. And that, not only that one act, but that act helps elevate it from just everyday building to a piece of architecture, because what's the difference? Architecture has meaning, and building is just prosaic. So, this is a piece of architecture at this point. And then the final thing, and this is something I've only just learned on the last one I did, which was at a church that we went to interviewed recently, is actually what I saw is that we facilitated the feedback for themselves. This group of people had worked so hard on this project for 5 years, had delivered it, gone straight into COVID. The project had delivered amazing stuff, and they hadn't yet stopped to talk about it. And we said, it was a bit odd for us. They were like, why are we doing this? We're just helping you doing your marketing. And I was like, well, no, I think what we're trying to do is help the next project. That's what we're trying to do. As well as, thank you, helping us with our marketing. Do appreciate that. But the power of this conversation was, they were just so enthusiastic because no one had asked them to talk about this project. They'd invested 5-6 years of their life in this project, 3 key people, and it's much more than 3, but we interviewed 3. And they had a story to tell, and yet it wasn't being told. And therefore it felt like a great honor to be able to sort of step into that and tell this story. Of which Catherine is now wandering through the footage in order to put a narrative to that. So it's really, really interesting. And I think that communication is one of the most important skills that we have. We denigrate it to a degree because we don't have enough respect for what we call marketing or sales. People hold those things in really low regard. And yet, marketing done well and sales done well are some of the most powerful opportunities that we have to interact with people. And I guess, why have we got this website? This is my life and the people's lives that are working on it. That's one of the reasons I do it. I'd like to look back over my life and go, okay, these are some of the things that I've been involved in over the last few years. And as I get older, you feel that need even more. I want a record of my own life, as well as hopefully providing our clients with a record of what they've been involved in. So, sorry, a long answer to a short question, but maybe that gives a personal view of what we do.
It is. Thank you, Alex. It's interesting what you touched on there about communication and how maybe it's overlooked. And I think that can be particularly the case with a written word. Certainly with website text, people think, I can write that. I can pop some text in there. And it's only when you start to work with someone like Catherine, and we worked on a recent project, and they were delighted by your work, Catherine, because not only did you take that pain away for them, but you were able to articulate things well for them. And I think that links on quite neatly to what we want to talk about, which is a world without email, where it comes down to communication. Now, let me just give some context to this. In fact, I'll bring up a screen where it shows the book, which I listen to on Audible, but it's available in paperback or however you choose to read it. Now, Alex, you get to do all of this marketing stuff. I mean, you do so much work. I mean, how you achieve the time for that is that you are trying to be efficient in what you're doing. And I think last year you started to work with a guy called Paul Watson, and I've worked with him as well to help facilitate some of the stuff he wants to do. But he basically took I think a big brain dump from you and what you're trying to achieve, and then basically has been implementing various systems internally and trying to not only simplify your IT systems, but help coordinate some of the people using those IT systems so that you're not present in every single loop in the business, that you're present where you need to be. But as part of that process, I guess I don't know if Paul recommended the book to you or you came across it, because Cal Newport, the writer, he's written a few other books, including Deep Work, which I think I have read. Anyway, you're going through this optimization process, and this came up when we were talking in one of our coaching calls. And as I said before, you recommended just the podcast, and I because I only wrote down the book, I just read the book. And I was reading it while I was, we were doing stuff to the garden. So I was listening to the Audible book, perfect for that, the audio version. And I often worry about business books because a lot of it is waffle. It's look at what I've done. They're talking about themselves. It's a lot of anecdotes. It's like, where's the bloody interesting bit? Where's the bit where you tell me what I need to do differently? And Cal's book was a little bit of anecdotal anecdotes from his point of view, because he needed to give some context, but then he would talk about how you might implement that, and it was going between them. So I quite like it. It wasn't padded with a load of waffle. And what I'm hoping we can do maybe is just go through some of the interesting things we found out of the book. I have certainly changed the way I work because of this book. Some of the things I was like, yeah, I do that, that's good there. Yes, I do that, that's good. But there was one nugget, which I'll get to later, that has actually changed my mindset on things quite a lot. But before we get there, Alex, you actually remember a world without email. And so do I. So I'm not saying this is definitely showing our age a little bit, but you were talking at the beginning before we started recording that you remember a world without email. Would you like to just take us back there? Tell us what it was like.
So, yeah, I mean, in terms of a world without email at work, I mean, I'm sure we all may remember a world without email, but not all of us. Some people may not. Just a little bit of prehistory. When I went to university, so this was 1997 in London, I was given an email address. Weirdly, there was no one to email. They just, my family didn't have one. I didn't use it. I didn't have a personal computer at that point. There were computers at the university. It wasn't a big thing. Then I graduated and I started my first job in Hereford, and it was relatively a forward-thinking practice, as in it worked on computers. At that point, people were, it wasn't unheard of by any means. It was definitely the way forward. But they'd been doing that for quite a long time, but they had one Mac in the corner that was connected to the internet. And it had the email address on it. There's only one email address for the
how
work.
Quaint.
Yeah, and my job, being the youngest person there, was to check it, and nothing ever came in via it. Literally no one emailed it. It was just like, you get the occasional thing. This was also before Google, which was kind of interesting as well. So, but how did people communicate with us? Literally, I remember there was the post. The post came in, the postman delivered it. The secretary opened everything, put it in a tray, and we all passed it around. We had a little she stamped it, bang. We all just initialed that we'd read the post. I mean, there was virtually nothing in it for me. It went around in the office, and that was it. There was also a fax machine during my tenure. When I started, it was desk-based with a little thermo thing in there. Fancy people used to send faxes. That was it. Whilst I was there, the multifunctional copy came in, and it had fax built in, which made fax actually a bit more regular. So we used to get maybe 5 faxes a day, and if there were 5 pieces of relevant posts, that would have been a busy post day. The rest of our time, we were given something to do and we did it, and we had meetings or phone calls, but not many of them. But most, communication was such a small part of our day. That was how we used to work. That was it. Interesting.
I know. I remember that too. I remember when you had to dial up to get email, and it was something you did a couple of times a day, maybe twice a day. Collect your email, and in that sense, it's very much like the post being delivered, and then you'd process it, and then you work on it, and it was lovely. You wouldn't get any interruptions from it. In fact, you were quite excited to do it because you might get something interesting, and I think that's part of the problem with email that we might get into. That sometimes you can get exciting things in there, and that makes your monkey brain constantly think, oh, I must check it just in case there's something in there that is exciting or desperate, urgent, and so on. And I think we've lost that, haven't we? When we work, we sit in front of a computer or we've got our phone with us all the time, and we feel constantly connected. And worse yet, people feel that we should be constantly connected. They feel they should be able to send us an email and we're going to see a ping or notification and click on it and read it straight away, as if it's a phone call. And actually, even with phone calls, while there are, I think, certainly I'm getting fewer phone calls, and in some cases going back to a time where I relish a phone call coming through because it means it's important. They need to speak to me right now, or we need to go over something in real time together. That I feel we've lost some of the time we have for work because we feel we must always be connected and always be checking. And it actually gives us a lot of distractions. And I think that's where this book arrives at. We're in a place now where we have email open all the time. People are expecting us to use it as an archive, a resource, a to-do list. And yet, how can you work with that with people constantly putting more papers on top of what you're working on at the time? People have even moved over to chat apps where it just takes that email communication and makes it fully real time, where anyone can pop in anything every single second that could be related to work or unrelated to work. You have no idea. It's basically a whole box full of stuff, and you've constantly got to sift through that. And the book is basically approaching it from that point. It's saying, where did we go wrong? And there's actually a lot of history in the book where they do go back almost to the time before email and studied how we work. And it's very similar to how you're describing, Alex, where the post would come in, it would get sent around on a trolley in bigger companies and distributed to everyone. You'd look at it, you'd process it, you'd deal with it, and then you'd get on with your day. You have work to do. So where do you want to start with this, Alex? Shall I start first? I've got a list of things here. Shall I go? Okay, so this is under the chapter called "Email Makes Us Miserable." And you know what? I have loved email. I think email is great. It's the one communication system where you don't need a special dedicated app connected to a company. Anyone can send an email to anyone else, and that is both its benefit and also its downfall with the sort of rise of spam. And so I think email has made us miserable because we work with it wrong. We deal with it in the wrong way, not because the technology is bad, but because of the assumptions that are put upon it. But so there's a couple of extracts I made out of this, and I actually felt compelled to do this while I was listening to the audiobook. I thought it was so good. I sort of made clips as I was going through it. So this first section is all about the importance of the visual and audible detail. So we're having a conversation now on Zoom. We can see each other. We can hear each other, hopefully. There's a lot of information we can get by the way our face looks, whether we're smiling, whether we're sad, whether we're confused, the way our voice sounds. And this element of it is talking about how important that is. And Cal talks about a study. I won't go into the details of the study. It's worth listening to or reading the book yourself, but I'll just briefly cover it. And there were some people who wanted to study sarcasm and whether sarcasm could be conveyed well in text. And so what they did, they had a first experiment where they got a list of topics, and they got the initial participants to write 2 sentences. One of them was sarcastic and one of them wasn't. So they're all about the same thing, but they made one sarcastic and one not. And the whole point of sarcasm is you kind of have to have some background knowledge and context to know whether what someone's saying is actually a joke or not. And that's what's interesting about it. So with those topics written down, with those sentences written down, normal and sarcastic, they emailed another group who weren't aware of whether the sentences were sarcastic or not. But before they did that, they asked the people who wrote the sentences to judge whether or predict whether the readers would get the choice right as to whether it's sarcastic or not. Then they gave it to these readers in another room. They emailed it to them, so they had it completely separate, and they read those sentences. And what they found was that the people who were oh, excellent, just been brought chocolate. That is always a good thing to have as part of one of these. What they found is that the people reading these sentences failed majority of the time to actually get it right. The writers were overconfident because they had context. They knew what they were writing, but when it came through in text, the readers could not determine which was sarcastic and which wasn't. They had a follow-up experiment where the writers actually read text on video. And obviously that made such a huge difference to the people who were listening to these sarcastic sentences. They could tell the difference because they could basically hear a little chuckle in the voice or the way a smile on their face. They could tell that it was sarcastic as opposed to just being in text. And I mean, people joke that you shouldn't communicate sort of highly things that might have a potential conflict with them over text, especially with a partner or people you're close to, because depending on the mood of the person who's reading it, they will infer or make a judgment about the context behind the text that you wrote them. I mean, you can use things like emoji, smiley faces to add some additional context to it. But people have had many arguments over the way something has been written because they have taken the meaning of that based on what they feel and not what the writer intended. And that is a key problem with email. It's one of the key problems with email is that people don't know the context with which you're sending something. And they can read an email and think this person's really angry with what I've done. And they're not. They're just being blunt. They're being potentially efficient. They think, well, I'll just quickly reply back, bullet, 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 done, send it off, hoping that they're, because they had 100 emails in their inbox, they needed to get them clear. Where when you get it, you think, oh, they don't like their website design, they don't like this, they're not happy with it. And you build up all of this feeling based on how you feel at the time. Maybe you're not feeling very confident that day and suddenly they've sent this email through. And I think that is so true. And I don't know if this helps or not, but I do try and give context to my emails when I'm sending them through, hopefully making sure that I'm not putting too much any sarcasm in it, really, or it's quite plain. And when there is a joke, any jokiness, it's with a smiley face, or where possible, I do it via email. What's your sort of thoughts on that, Alex, in terms of that sort of written communication?
Yeah, it's, at the one point we've got that we know communication is so important, and yet we're constantly bombarded with the need to do it and get it done. So it's just not going to work, is it? We can't process that amount of information to that many people and get it right. So it really kind of sums up the thing that actually that we're going to need to find a better way of doing it. I mean, one way I kind of start to think about these things is in terms of a little matrix, which is 4 boxes, one of which is defined by same place, same time. Yeah, That is our best form of communication, and we call that a meeting. In your world and in my world, Ben, I will have a face-to-face meeting occasionally, and some things can only be done at that face-to-face meetings. We'll have the drawings in front of us, we'll be in the same space, we know exactly what's going on. It will have taken invested time to get there. With our resources, we will all be fully present for say an hour and a half. That starts to be the length of a time, and we'll all be invested. And honestly, for some things, they can only be sorted out at those things, and that's it. And you cannot sort those things out by email. And if you try and do one via email, which should be at a meeting, that's just going to end up as a disaster, and things are going to go badly south. The alternative is what we're doing at the moment, which same time, different place. And I think, what COVID has given us is, a worldwide global training on video conferencing. And this is also very, very helpful. A really good tool that we should, and quite often now we'll just say, let's jump onto Zoom and just discuss this, because we can share our screens. Not perfect for very technical information, it's better to be face-to-face and be able to draw, but much better. The other thing is, and telephones are like that as well. Same time, different space. Then there are then there is really, which is email, different times, different spaces, which is what, so actually email, what's great about email is that you don't have to be in the same place and you don't have to do that at the same time, which is what's great about it. I can send it, you can pick it up another time. But we've got to realize that's a very, very simple form of communication.
Yeah.
So let's keep these things, if we're going to do email, we've got to keep it simple, because as soon as we try and put anything on there, we're going to lose out. So I think one of the key things about it is, let's not use email for things that email should not be designed for. It's almost like a notification or passing over information that we've discussed or will discuss.
Yes.
So I think that's important, because it will not, you cannot communicate effectively. And if you try to, you're basically going to be writing verse after verse, and no one likes that. You don't like it, and they don't like it.
No, you get an email like that, you go, oh, I'll leave it till later.
I know.
It's death to an email, you forget about it.
That's right. So interesting, but yeah, we overuse email, and we think that it's a good communication thing, and it is brilliant for very certain things, and it's hopeless for others. And I think that's one of the first key things I'd take from the book, which really helps explain that. And is important when you're doing marketing or sales or communication or anything in life.
Yeah, I think this is relevant to this, but he mentioned then that email is low friction, because it's very easy to send someone something and make sure it gets through to them, and it's easy to send multiple. There's no cost to it apart from the power that we're using for our computers. So you can send as many emails as you like, and because of that can build up a bit of what he calls a feedback loop. And because if the person on the other end is responding to emails as quickly as you're replying to them, then you might feel compelled to reply to them more quickly, because they go, oh, I see they're online now, I'll reply back. And then you go, oh, I should reply back now. They think I'm online, so I should do that. And it's a bit, he says, a bit like a microphone being too close to a speaker, and it can just get out of control and too noisy. And then you end up chatting and not really communicating effectively. Whereas if you had to send a letter, you would make sure they have everything in it they need. You would consider it. You might put it to one side and read it later before you send it, because you know that's going to take maybe a day or so to reach them. And so you're going to be much more considerate about their time reading it, and also them not having to reply, you wait a day, and so on. But people feel, because it's so quick, oh, I'll just quickly send them this message. I'll mention this as well because it really irritates me, but people feel they'll get an email through and then forward it to you and going, what do you think? Yeah. And you look at it and go, of what? This is a really long email thread. What do you want me to do with this? Do you want me to read it all? And that's all you want me to do? Do you want me to take action to what John said a couple of emails back? It's because that person's got context. They've been having this email conversation. They send it through to you and you're like, I have no idea what you want me to do. There's also potential privacy issues there as well with other people getting into the loop. But yeah, that's frustrating. That's something like, in terms of good email etiquette, you should, if you do need to give everyone that context, you should pull out some quotes from it and say, I'll give you all this email as context, but this is the bit I need you to focus on. What do you think about the color of our next widget? And the pricing. There's just something in terms of, one thing Cal talks about in terms of getting rid of this, using email like a chat system, is to use things like shared spreadsheets for status updates, because a lot of people might feel they need to they use email to say, oh, Alex, how are you getting on with X? And the reason they're doing that is because that other person hasn't communicated that they've finished, or they've started, or they're waiting on something. And what Cal says can actually get rid of a lot of those status update notifications are either giving someone an expectation of when it will be completed and completing it either before or on that date. And so they therefore then start to trust you, and they don't need to follow you up. or using a spreadsheet or something like that, which can be shared. And you can give that person a list of everything on there, when things are going to be updated, the details of work that has been done already, so that they don't need to check with you. They can check with that spreadsheet. And we do use spreadsheets, but we tend to use Basecamp for that. So our project management system, we tend to have all the information in there so that clients, if they want, they can go into Basecamp and check up on that and see our progress, rather than us sending them status updates all the time, which we do, but only if it's important. So I thought that was quite interesting. It may be that actually, do we need to use email for this communication? Or could we give the responsibility of the person who wants the update, that information in a place that they can get when they are ready to get it, rather than them having to ask for it, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was good. And I thought that it was one of those little hacks. So, you know, there's this little bit in there where it's like, well, you can do this, and this, but whose responsibility is it to do that? Well, it's going to need to start with you, as it were.
Yeah.
I thought it was a really helpful approach in terms of, you know, how we start to outroll that. So he gave us an example of, you know, people may, you know, you can't, it becomes a little bit rude on a day-to-day to tell people how they should work. But what you can do is you can, you know, there's this Franciscan monk that I follow. What does he say? The best criticism of the bad is the practice of the better. And I love that. So he said, you know, if people are sending you lots of bits and pieces, that's okay. That's okay. Do not look to respond to each one of them. Just gather them together, form them into, and what he's always trying to encourage us to do is, let's structure information better so that it can be more useful to us. So he'll say, right, fine, take all of these, you know, I've got 10 emails here, I've put them in a little spreadsheet, I've gathered them all together. Here's the things, actually, actually this and this cancelled each other out, so we don't need to worry about that. Actually, we have 3 key areas. Those will cover in 6 months' time, but these are the answers to that. Bang. We've suddenly elevated something that is, you know, just very low value information-wise, and we've actually added value to it by structuring it. So it's a little bit, I guess, like when I go to the accountant, you know, what's my life with money like on a day-to-day basis? It's a receipt here, it's a bill here, there, wages there, but I have a meeting with my accountant every quarter and we review the figures. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. There are bookkeepers, there are systems, but there's real power in that. Look, these things are making profit. You're overspent here. If you don't look out for it, you're going to pay tax in this area here. So what is the opportunity here? If we don't do anything about this stuff, we're always going to be subject to just working with very, very useless, low-grade information that's taking out all our time. Or, you know, and we can't, you know, that's the world that we're living in. So I can't make people change. I can be the change in that situation. So if we're running companies, how do we start to elevate our own communication to something that is actually better and is going to deliver outcomes? Now, the trouble is that people won't be happy with you in the first instance because you just haven't given them what they want. They're addicted. They want the hit, bang. But actually what they really want, in my case, is a building. And if we're going to do a building, we're going to have to work in a certain way in order to deliver that. And we're going to need to start going on that journey. Now, bit of a thing here. You know, it's easy to sound like when I say something like that, I have got it sorted. I haven't. But I'm better than I was. You know, we're making steps in that. We're trying to be better. But the key thing, a few key things is, you know, when we're on site, particularly, we diarize, put in the diary, meetings every 2 weeks. And the great thing about that is that naturally people trust that we will always turn up to the meeting, and the guys on site will gather a few things together for us. Oh, I'll wait for, you know, we're only ever a week away. I'll gather that stuff. And the really good guys, they'll have a list and they say, great, let's just go through this. Really, you know, we've moved something from day-to-day crapness, short stuff that doesn't really tell us anything, to diarizing a high value meeting, which we're in the same place at the same time, looking at the same stuff. And we've gathered all those up and we deal with all of them in 45 minutes and everyone walks away happy.
Yeah.
It's nothing like a great meeting. So I think this is the opportunity for us. Now, as I say, that's something that's worked for us. My day-to-day life, I want to create even more of those things because I still suffer from overload in email, both sending and receiving. So please don't think, this is just us sharing. I'm not perfect here, but
no, and that's the thing. I think but you recognize there is opportunity to improve and be better. What you say about having the trusted meeting, that's something I do. I've done for a long time, but I never realized the power of it, how important it is. When you're working with someone on a regular basis, they know that every month you're going to turn up on time, whether it's usually for me, it's in Zoom, for you, it's in person. You're going to turn up on time and they know that you're going to go through the previous tasks, that we're going to cover those off, that we're generally not going to miss anything because that is the process we do every single time. It's very particular, but it's so we don't miss things. And that if they have sent me things in between, I may not reply to every single one of them, but they know that they can put it in a trusted place. They know if they just send me an email or they put it into Basecamp, we don't need to respond straight away because they know we'll pick it up at the next meeting. Unless it's urgent, obviously, if there is a big problem, it gets dealt with. Otherwise, they know that month's meeting is going to come up and it will be dealt with then. And that has worked for, oh gosh, I mean, we've been working since 2012 together, and we've been pretty much doing that. Having the same process. It's not every month anymore, but it's the same process. We have a meeting and we pick up everything up before that point. So generally nothing is missed. Like you, I can't say we're perfect on that, but it does for me, it takes the stress away. I'm not sitting there thinking, oh, I must do this because I've got the deadline of the next meeting when things need to be done by. Clients know that's the deadline for the next meeting. I don't have any unforeseen assumptions that they've put upon me that I don't know about. And so that takes all that stress away and I know when I can deal with it. And that has been such a big thing for me in terms of actually coping with the amount of work we do. It becomes possible to do that in a sane way. And that's he covers that, Cal covers that in, I think it's chapter 4, basically. If someone trusts you, if you do what you say you're going to do, they will trust you and they won't need to over communicate with you. People only do that when they can't trust you, when you're not delivering on time, you're not doing the work you say they're going to do. And so they feel they have to take ownership of that. So the best way of getting people off your back is just to do what you say you're going to do. Don't be flaky, basically. There's a final section I want to look at. I mean, maybe there's something else you want to look at, but the final bit that I found, this is the bit I found really powerful for me. And it's under chapter 7, the specialization principle. And it's all about fragmented attention. And that one of the problems with email, and Cal isn't being, he doesn't hate email. He's frustrated by it, but he lumps email in with Slack, Teams, any real-time chat application, particularly ones that show presence, whether you're around or not, because that's even worse. But he's basically talking about if we live in these programs, if we're always online, people able to interrupt us, communicate with us and send us information, and we feel the need to respond to that, our attention is always fragmented between communicating and the work we are trying to do. And it's why so many people will get to the end of the day and feel, oh, I've only got an hour left, if they're lucky, to actually do the work they need to do. And that's why so many people work late. So many people work on the weekends, because that's when other people are doing the same thing. They're all working this extra time that really should be spent for yourself. That's your own time. You get paid, or your job, even if you own the company, should be to do work within hours that you're comfortable with and not have this time to stretch. But I've got a quote here, which is really interesting. And he says, an hour of hard work on a project and an hour of work on admin gives you more productivity than basically mixing up the two. Because you might do both badly. You'll probably come away with feeling, well, I've had loads of emails today and I've not done any work. Whereas if you can start the day with do an hour of work on what needs to be done and then move to an hour of admin, you are going to enjoy both, or at least I enjoy both. I relish the opportunities to sort of get my head up, have a look at email, see what's come in, process it, put it in the right places, and then get back on with work again. And one of the ways he says that helps deal with this fragmentation is to get an assistant. Now, I know you, Alex, you have other people working for you who are able to take on this role, and that's actually what you've been sort of working on with who was his name? Sorry, I can't remember his name now. Paul. I don't know why I can't remember Paul's name. I've worked with him a lot. But helping you to silo some of the work you do, so you can have other people doing work for you, and then basically preparing that information for when you need it. But the big thing, and I'll get to the crux of it, the big thing that I found really important or crucial is that if you don't have an assistant, you can be your own assistant. And so I now set aside time, and I was partially doing this, but I didn't do it with such focus, is that I would set aside time to be my own assistant, where I would check my email. I would look through Basecamp for various different notes. I might check other notifications, other systems, and pull it all together, and then basically create packs of information to go in the right places. So when I'm ready to work on stuff, it's all there. I'm not having to look in my email for resources. Oh, Jane sent me a logo. I must go into my email and get that. I've already taken that and put it into the right place. So I'm not distracted. I can just, when I've got time in my diary to do that work, I'm doing the work. I'm not worried about anything else. And I've been doing that since I read the book, which is probably a couple of months now, really focused on trying to be my own assistant. And it's so nice, because when you are doing the work, you are not worried about your email. You're not worried about your phone calls coming through, because they will be dealt with by your assistant, which is yourself, in a couple of hours' time. You will deal with it. It's so liberating. It really is. It's made such a difference to the way I work. And again, I'm not perfect at it. Sometimes you slip back into bad habits, but most of the time it works really well. Now, Alex, as you do have assistants, or you do have people who work on different aspects of the business to support what you're doing, have you done that out of necessity, or have you done that through a focus of trying to not fragment your attention? How have you got to that point?
Honestly, if I could do everything myself, then I would do it, wouldn't I? Because obviously I'm better at doing it than everyone else. That's
don't tell them that.
But that is such, you can't. And B, what was interesting when Ben and I had Ben had a strategy for our website, and basically it was like, you need to write articles, Alex. And I was like, okay, I'm dyslexic, I find writing very hard. And so, I'd labor over this thing, produce it, and Ben would go, yeah, it's good, well done, put it out there. And it's like, we need another one. It's like, what? So he said, have you ever thought of speaking with a copywriter? And hence the amazing Catherine, who honestly, is just one of God's greatest gifts to me. Maybe she sits slightly below my wife and kids, but only just really. But the amazing thing was that Catherine and I would have a chat about what I was thinking, and then Catherine would write it. And her writing was so much better than mine. It was different from how I would do it. I had to okay, but you got the tone just how I wanted it, Catherine, better than how I wanted it. But what was the interesting thing was, when the bill came through, it still took Catherine time. It's still, I'd say that it would take, I could do it in an hour, or she could do it in an hour. The funny thing was that her hour would be a better output than my hour. But I didn't have that hour. And it's like the overhead associated with that hour, the thinking about what I would do, the worry about it, the correction, getting someone else to check, all of that had gone away. So the weird thing is, you think, there's a few different things I've had to learn, is that actually, if I give it to someone else, probably, certainly in the beginning, they're going to take longer to do the job than I'm going to do it. So I'm going to have to pay people to spend more time than I would do to do it. Yeah. But what's the advantage? Basically, I am limited to, I'd like to say I'm limited to 40 hours a week, 10 to that could be 60 hours a week, but it doesn't matter. There's a limit to what I do. And as I push over that 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week, my mental health goes down. So my time is limited. So how do we increase our time? We have to work with other people, because that's how we increase our things. So working, A, we have to work with others. B, as we work with others, yes, there is a growth period where it takes us time to work with others to get our things up and running. But now, last set of articles that we did, poor Catherine had to suffer a voice note from me, just warbling on about, random thoughts that are entering my head, rah, 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 rah. But great, I didn't even have to think. I had a few thoughts, and Catherine structured all of that into powerful articles that we're now using again and again and again. So there's a magic about working with people, but it takes an investment in order to get that return, which I think is important. I find it difficult to work with people. I'm naturally a bit of a control freak. I'm naturally an introvert, or more introvert than extrovert. And so it takes energy for me to work with people. And I have to really work at it. And therefore, I really enjoy the trusted relationships that I have. We've worked together for years, Ben. And we have I think that's the other thing about working with people. Over time, it releases so much more joy and energy and production. And the same with Catherine. I just enjoy our working relationship so much now. So, but you have to also find ways of working with people. So yes, you need to work with people. Yes, in the beginning, it's difficult to work with people, and it's a cost to work with people. But ultimately, if it's good, it's going to be a productive relationship. And if you start working with a great team, they will do, it's that song, they will know more than you will ever know. They will do more than you will ever know. And that's actually, I think, from a life point of view, what makes it so life-giving, that we're suddenly part of this community of relationships that we both give and receive from that. So that's slightly, enigmatic. Sorry, I've gone off course, but that's my own personal journey on how I've had to start to work with people, and the mindset that I've needed to let go of. Yes, notionally you can do it yourself, but if you think that, you're going to live a very, very limited, restricted life. And work should be about the more. The more it works, the more you get from the work, and the more joy that it gives. That all sounds very utopian. Last night I was banging my head against the wall going, how am I going to sort this company out? Yeah. So there's both the good and the bad, but I think working with people done well, and that's what we're really talking about here, is how do we work with people well? If you're going to work with people well, you've got to find the right people, and you've got to find the right processes, and you've got to find the right systems to work with them. That's really what Paul has brought to our company. He says his job is about people, processes, and systems. And you need all of those things to work well in order to deliver a company, which is, I think that what Cal says is, when did email become our workflow? My workflow as an architect shouldn't be defined by the communication that's coming through the door, but it does become it.
Yeah, and it defines people's day.
Yeah, we've got to step away from that and say, I'm not working from my inbox, I'm working down my to-do list. I've got to work down my to-do list, and I've got to then be efficient and communicate with people efficiently and effectively. And that's, for me, what I got from the book. Stop, unless we've got to step away from this, because he talks about this hyperactive hive mind mentality, which is just a recipe for a breakdown. And also it will limit your growth. And as I grow the company, each time I grow it, I have to figure out what that growth looks like and what my role in it, what do I do less of, what do I do more of, but how do I talk to the team? Really difficult stuff, really difficult. And the trouble with email is it's easy. Bang, 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 bang. But it's very, very, very unproductive. Last thing I'll say before I wrap up is it's interesting when he talked about we introduced all this technology, and the cost of that technology was whatever it was, huge, and the increase in productivity across the GDP has been like 1%. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think in real terms, he's saying actually productivity hasn't increased; it's gone down.
Yeah,
because like going back, people were more productive because you would just do your work. You would have people would have certain jobs, and people would pass work from one person to another, and that made them very efficient at doing that particular job. Now, maybe it makes it boring. That's true, but I think we've gone the other way now, that you can have people running entire companies and doing everything, but they're just constantly splitting their mind between everything and not really doing anything very well. Or they are, and they're burning out. They are on it all the time. They're working 16 hours or plus a day, and they just can't cope. And eventually they fail, which is horrible. No one should have that. Work should be something we like doing. Work should be something fulfilling, part of our day, not something which we dread, and unfortunately is for a lot of people. So you're quite right, Alex. If we have the right people we're working with, whether they're employees or clients, I mean, that's the people I work with. They're the people I get fulfillment from, or contractors even. Whoever the people are, it should be fun. It should be something we relish, not something, oh, I don't want to open my email because I don't know what's in there. That's the worst feeling ever.
I mean, I do a small amount of coaching for people, and who are the people that we should employ first? For me, a bookkeeper. If you run a small company, employ a bookkeeper. It will take a huge amount off. They'll do it within 2 or 3 hours a month. They'll sort out that, and that's something then you don't need to talk about. Then you don't need to worry about. They'll sort it out. Prepare it for your account. Next person for me was an assistant and a secretary, an office manager, someone that can start to organize your time, file, do the more administration part of your time. You can do that with virtual assistants or physical assistants. Honestly, that's how offices used to be run. There was a few people, and then there were floors of typists and assistants and project execs. Suddenly all that went away, and they said we could do it with email. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, just crazy.
And actually, assistants don't need to be seen as lesser. If you have a good assistant, they should be almost worth more than the people doing the work, because they should be very effective. There's no reason an assistant to someone else should be considered a lesser position or being paid less.
It's interesting, isn't it? So if you're on your own, and let's say it's just work that you have 40 hours a week, let's some of that time, so that gives you 160, 150 hours a month that you've got. That's all the time you've got. So within all that, you've got to do your sales, you've got to do your marketing, you've got to do your administration, you've got to do your bookkeeping, you've got to do emails, you've got to do everything. I've just done this exercise with someone, and he was shocked when he recorded his time really accurately. He only had a third of his time was actually what he thought his productive thing was. So effectively what's happening is all time is valuable. All time is actually the same value. But in order to make companies work, we specialize. So I specialize in architecture, and there's things that I'm best at within that, and I need to spend my time doing that and let other people do things that I shouldn't do just to do more of it. And you've got to do that. And it's a basic business principle, but email seems to have taken all of that away from us, weirdly. But it hasn't. It's just made highly paid people really, really unproductive.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
Yeah, it has.
Crazy. It's a step backwards. And that's what we realize.
Well, thank you, Alex. We better finish it there, because I think we started late, but we're just coming up to the hour, I believe. That was very good. I mean, I recommend that people check out the book, A World Without Email, Cal Newport. I listened to it on Audible because then I could do something else while I found it very difficult to read and set aside that time. So having someone talk to me is quite nice. So that's really good. But he's got some other ones like Deep Work. There's another book, which I think Cal mentions, called, I think it's Rework by 37 Signals. and they talk about a few of the same things, but coming at it from their very unique perspective. But I think the key thing is get other people to do the work that either you don't enjoy or you're not very good at, and try and focus on your time. And if you can't do that, if you're building a business and you're not quite ready to do that yet, carve out time to be those different people so that you're not flipping between different roles. It's made such a difference just in the short time that I've been doing it to not anxiety. I've never really been anxious about that, but I've been able to focus more and sort of do better work, hopefully. So they're the two things I get from it. Thank you very much, Alex. Really appreciate your time. And we'll catch up afterwards about a few things. But for everyone else, we're here every Friday from 10 a.m. We cover everything from marketing, strategy, social, SEO, video, and even book reviews. I'd like to do some more of these at some point. If you've got something exciting to share, get in touch, email us support@ratherinventive.com. We'd love to have you on to talk about that project or whatever it is you're doing in your business that you feel would be worth other people knowing about. Next up, next week, we've got Jack McCautry. He's coming on to talk about case studies and how they're an effective way to capture attention and build brand awareness. We certainly know that with what Alex has been doing. If you'd like to invite a colleague, just share the Zoom link with them. Feel free to come along. Do let us know. We'd like to welcome them and see who's coming. But other than that, we record every single one of these webinars. They're all on Basecamp, so do get over to them there. And if you want some recommendations, just email us support@ratherinventive.com. Tell us what you need to know about, and I will find the right one for you. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next week. Bye-bye.